The world is changing at unparalleled pace. We are facing increasing pressure from global challenges. Despite these challenges, our world has made great strides in advancing growth. The global economy is recovering, and this is our chance to shape a better future for our planet and our people.
Since its establishment in 2010, the Business 20 or B20 has served as the voice of the business community in the G20 forum. Together, B20 participants are committed to making impact in the world, voicing out their ideas to push private-led economic transformation forward.
As business leaders in the Group of 20, the future relies on you to find lasting solutions to our current global challenges and pave the way forward.
This year, Indonesia is honored to be the host of the G20 and B20 summits. As the fourth largest nation, the biggest economy in Southeast Asia, and one of the world's most prominent emerging markets, Indonesia is home to 270 million consumers, 63 million MSMEs, and 12 tech unicorns. Boasting rapid digital growth and emerging sustainable development, Indonesia truly is a land of opportunities. Under this year's theme of advancing innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth, the B20 stands ready to promote dialogue among business players in G20 countries, provide policy recommendations, and launch initiatives on issues that matter. The themes are aligned with the key messages from inception meeting.
Berharap komunitas B20 akan memberikan tawaran-tawaran konkret yang bisa menjadi bagian dari capaian konkret KTT G20.
And the leadership of governments like Indonesia is going to be absolutely essential in this decisive decade of our climate fight.
The B20 has established several task forces to push progress forward and ensure that we will create recommendations that are actionable, sustainable, and inclusive. These task forces will represent the business community and advocate policy recommendations to the government. In this B20 presidency, we are committed to creating legacy programs that lay foundation for positive, lasting impact across G20 countries, marked by big new ideas, international collaboration, and tangible as well as sustainable impact, prototype in Indonesia and to be scaled globally. We welcome you to become a part of our journey toward a better tomorrow. Join us at the B20 Summit on November 13th and 14th, 2022, and let's collaborate to bring positive, lasting change for our world.
To solve the climate crisis, every one of us has a role to play. As a reflection of our strategy to build trust with stakeholders and deliver sustained outcomes, we're committed to leading by example. In 2020, we made a commitment to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. There are 5 things I'm particularly proud of. First, our climate targets were independently validated as being in line with a 1.5 degree scenario. Importantly, our climate targets cover emissions across our whole value chain, including both direct and indirect emissions across Scope 1, 2, as well as 3. Second, recognizing that our commitment is going to take an effort across our whole business, we now have a net zero leader in each country in which we operate around the world to drive local execution. And we've committed to have the carbon emissions associated with delivering our services by 2030. Third, we are contributing to the transition to net zero around the world. For example, we're a proud member of the UN's Race to Zero and the business ambition for 1.5 degrees. Specifically, we've joined the largest public-private coalition to expand the market for high-integrity carbon credits as well as protect tropical forests. And we've also committed to accelerate the supply and use of sustainable aviation fuel. Fourth, we continue to support the development of globally aligned ESG reporting standards by collaborating with standard setters and organizations like the World Economic Forum. We've become a founding member of the Net Zero Financial Service Providers Alliance, which means that we'll report on how our audit services are consistent with broader net zero goals. And finally, fifth, we're upskilling all of our people on the importance and relevance of climate, ESG, and all of the related issues. And we're supporting our clients as they develop and implement concrete net zero plans and embed ESG across the entirety of their organizations. And as a community of solvers, we are uniquely positioned to bring the right combination of people, capabilities, and technology together to support the worldwide focus on the net zero transition.
Indonesia is abundant with energy, which is produced from various sources in various forms and is continuously moving the dynamics of every life every day. Pertamina has continued to be the leader for more than 6 decades, with commitments to perpetually innovate in bringing energy to life. Consistently giving the most in every exploration, production, and other business activity to produce the best energy worldwide. Delivering energy evenly to cities, to remote frontiers, so that everyone can use the energy and move forward together. Various initiatives are taken in developing renewable energy, such as geothermal, solar cell, biofuel, lithium battery, and even electricity. Together with its affiliates, Pertamina is committed to achieve energy sustainability, fuel the economy, and build the future. Pertamina ensures that energy is also available for the environment, education, healthcare, and community empowerment. Pertamina believes that every continuous innovation is the energy to step forward. Pertamina is the energy, driving force of progress for every part of life.
Jadi ketika musim kemarau, kendala yang kami hadapi yaitu mengenai tidak adanya akses air bersih. Sehingga harus ambil sendiri atau membeli ke area Nusa Kambangan di sana. Sering terjadi banjir lompak atau banjir rob laut. Pembangkit listrik tenaga surya ini dimanfaatkan listriknya untuk pengoperasian sistem desalinasi air bersih. Digunakan untuk warga Dusun Bondan sejumlah sekitar 78 kepala keluarga. Air tawar hasil desalinasi ini bisa digunakan untuk kegiatan ibu-ibu memasak. Limbah kegiatan ibu rumah tangga ini tidak dibuang begitu saja dan dimanfaatkan bercocok tanam sayur mayur. Ada aktivitas penanaman pohon beringin laut. Pohon beringin ini mampu menyerap zat-zat yang kurang baik. Seluruhnya warga Dusun Bondan benar-benar sejahtera, mampu meningkatkan perekonomian masyarakat.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam kebajikan. Good evening, distinguished guests, Bapak dan Ibu yang terhormat. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the B20 Energy Sustainability and Climate or ESC Task Force side event with particular focus on accelerating the transition to sustainable energy use. My name is Annette Lingabito, and it is an honor for me to be the host of today's event. Before we begin, Please allow me to go over a few housekeeping rules for this webinar. For technical and quality purposes, only speakers and panelists will be able to use their microphones and cameras. Participants' audio will be muted during the webcast. Please turn on your camera during photo session. Please submit questions through Slido by scanning the QR code that will be displayed on the screen. Please write down your name and company or institution when posting questions or comments to the speakers. Depending on the time, moderator may need to combine the questions of similar topics, and we may not respond to all questions submitted. Please note that this webinar will be recorded for documentation purposes. First and foremost, I would like to thank everyone for allocating time in your busy schedules to join this online event. Before we move deeper into the event itself, allow me to extend a warm welcome to our guest of honor, speakers, and panelists. Ibu Sinta Wijaya Kamdani, Chair of B20 Indonesia, Bapak Arsyad Rashid, Chairman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or Kadin Indonesia, Ibu Nike Widiawati, Chair of B20 Energy Sustainability and Climate Task Force, and also President Director and CEO of PT Pertamina Persero, Bapak Yudo Dwinanda Priaadi, Chair of G20 Energy Transition Working Group, Bapak Agung Wicaksono, Managing Director of PT Jababeka Infrastruktur, and also Deputy Chair of B20 ESC Task Force, Bapak Wiluyo Kusdwiharto, Director of Mega Projects and New and Renewable Energy of PT PLN Persero, who is represented by Bapak Zainal Arifin, Executive Vice President of Engineering and Technology of PT PLN Persero. Ibu Febriany Eddy, President Director and CEO of PT Vale Indonesia Tbk, who is also co-chair of B20 ESC Task Force. Bapak Florian Kitt, Senior Energy Specialist of Asian Development Bank. Bapak Oki Muraza, Senior Vice President of Research and Technology Innovation of PT Pertamina Persero, who is also the Policy Manager of the B20 ESC Task Force. Task Force members, chairs and co-chairs, members of Society of Renewable Energy, and also joining us from PwC Indonesia, the knowledge partner of B20 ESC Task Force, who are co-hosting, represented by Bapak Sacha Winzenried, Energy Utilities and Resources Leader of PwC Indonesia, and Bapak Yanto Kamarudin, Energy Utilities and Resources Partner of PwC Indonesia. This event is also supported by sponsors of B20 Indonesia. As main sponsors, PT Astra International Tbk, PT Bayan Resources Tbk, PT Indika Energy Tbk, Sinarmas, and also bronze sponsors, April Group, Bakri Group, PT Bank Sentral Asia Tbk, PT Elang Mahkota Teknologi Tbk, PT Goto Gojek Tokopedia Tbk, PT Indofood Sukses Makmur Tbk, Lipo Group, Permata Bank, and Telkom Indonesia. This side event is conducted in relation to the ESC Task Force International Essay Competition, which is organized by the Society of Renewable Energy. Okay, to start our event, it is a pleasure for me to call upon Bapak Sacha Winzenried, the Energy Utilities and Resources Leader from PwC Indonesia, to open the webinar. To Pak Sacha, the screen is yours.
Thank you, thank you, Annette. Good day, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world at the moment. And welcome to this side event for the B20 Energy Sustainability and Climate Task Force, titled Accelerating the Transition to Sustainable Energy Use. My name is Sacha Winzenried, and I lead PwC's Energy Utilities and Resources practice in Indonesia. Thank you to all our distinguished speakers and panelists for joining today. It's a great pleasure for PwC to host this event and indeed to support the ESC task force over the last year as a knowledge partner. PwC sees the energy transition and the move to net zero as one of the key challenges for the globe and especially for developing economies over the coming years. It's imperative for business to engage with government and other stakeholders to ensure that the targets that have been set for limiting global warming can be realised, and at the same time to ensure the sustainability of our own businesses. As we see at PwC, as we work with our clients on these issues, there is more and more pressure on businesses to meet the ever more stringent requirements of investors and financiers in relation to environmental, social and governance, or ESG concerns, while at the same time demanding the investment needed to support the energy transition. And as the world is realizing now, progressing the energy transition while maintaining energy security of supply is a difficult balancing act. The G20 can play an important role in providing the investment climate needed for business to support the acceleration of the transition to sustainable energy. And the B20 ESC Task Force policy paper makes some key recommendations on this, as we will discuss later. So once again, thank you to our speakers and thank you all for joining. I look forward to an interesting and fruitful discussion. I hand back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Sacha. Now, moving on to our welcome address, I would like to invite the chair of B20 Indonesia 2022, Ibu Sinta Wijaya Kamdani. To Ibu Sinta, the screen is yours.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our colleagues at the B20 Task Force Energy, Sustainability and Climate, and our knowledge partner PwC, all invited speaker, good evening. I'm delighted to welcome and thank everybody at the task force for the continuous hard work and efforts in formulating the best policy recommendation for G20 leaders this year. For months, this is not the first side event of B20, but I still see the great energy coming from everyone involved in the task force. More importantly, all members, knowledge partners who are coming today, thank you so much for your valuable support. Your presence are definitely important, so we may bring these recommendations into action. We all have the policy action to be the basis of our work. Thus, we would like to hear your inputs to further remind all relevant stakeholders that accelerating the transition to sustainable energy use could not be just ended with nice words. As you might have heard, B20 Indonesia is aiming to not just be ended with policy recommendations. We are thrilled to see more partnership opportunities among G20 countries in the form of concrete investment projects during and after the summit. I'm very glad by seeing how the ESC task force has driven more commitments on this matter. At this stage, we are in the process of advocating the policy recommendation not merely to raise more awareness, but also to push government in designing the feasible policy implementation. The ESC task force has covered comprehensively the needs and ways to accelerate the shifting to sustainable energy use, to ensure a just, orderly, and affordable transition, and to address energy poverty. The task force meetings were successfully encapsulating multiple enabling aspects and concerning barriers of its implementation, from government policy and regulation, infrastructure, technology, pricing, and standardization scheme, etc. I believe the recommendations have met the key values of our future energy use: efficient and sustainable. More details will be shared by Ibu Nika later during this discussion, and we are indeed thankful for her leadership. During the COP26, Indonesia has committed to reach net zero by 2060 or sooner. Indonesia has also pledged to phase out coal-fired power plants by 2040 with financial assistance from the international community. Additionally, the Indonesian government aims to increase renewable energy contribution to Indonesia's overall energy mix from current 12% to 23% by 2025. Business sectors are ready to support Indonesia's net zero vision, and it must be driven through more investment to energy projects. However, this is not only Indonesia's commitment. At the end, the COP26 participating nation made some important endeavors in addressing these financial requirements, from urging developed countries to increase its monetary contribution and calling multilateral banks, other relevant financial institutions, and private sectors to enhance higher financial mobilization to the global climate efforts. This is a global agenda. The burden of achieving the ambitious climate goals is indeed impossible to be just handled by governments. A variety of climate solutions like energy transition, anti-deforestation, and circular economy require the active involvement of businesses or private sectors. Government may have political tools through policy outputs and national climate regulations. However, we must admit business has more room for innovation and financial resources. Therefore, the B20 Indonesia using the momentum to continue these efforts. B20 definitely adds more value to the existing commitments with several highlights. First, B20 emphasized that energy transition should be mindful of society in general. We are developing recommendations to mitigate financial impact and address loss of livelihood of energy transition. We should not let anybody feel harmed by this, including skilled fossil fuel sector employees. B20 is working closely with L20 on this matter to ensure that labor is put into the equity. Second, B20 Indonesia put a strong concern on energy security. A very dynamic geopolitical and geoeconomics constellation is indeed creating high uncertainties to our energy production and consumption. We are trying to ensure that the world could be managed the capacity to meet current and future energy demand reliably and also withstand any bounce back swiftly from system shocks with minimal disruption to supplies. In order to guarantee a green energy security, we need collaboration between global players for multiple sectors, enroll investors, lenders, project developers, and technology providers. We don't want to see B20 Indonesia as a one-stop event and nothing tangible resulted from the meeting. In addition to the developing policy recommendation, B20 Indonesia also developed potential legacy program to ensure tangible solution beyond this year's presidency in accelerating green transition. First, the Carbon Center of Excellence will help businesses understand and navigate carbon trading topics through its Knowledge Hub and Practice Sharing Center. By increasing businesses' knowledge and capabilities to develop the business case for green projects, we aim to increase the number of bankable, sustainable projects that are available for financing. Second, the Global Blended Finance Alliance, a new multilateral organization designed to scale and replicate technological and financial innovation and solution, included blended finance, to unlock investment in climate action and the SDG managed by Triheta Karana. Moreover, I believe that in parallel, we business sectors can come up with innovative projects to help the government efforts in accelerating the transition of our energy use, improving our energy efficiency, and also building a net zero economy. Just to give you an example, as the leading organization of business players, Kadin, or the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, has already started to dive net zero at scale through the creation of a national net zero hub, which aim to accelerate private sector contribution in reaching net zero. We will help companies to decarbonize through several key activities, such as its Knowledge and Mobilization Center to facilitate knowledge transfer via forum or webinar, and encouraging private sector in pledging to net zero. Kadin Net Zero Hub will also act as a networking facilitator to connect companies to the right potential ecosystem partner to enable net zero transformation. We are inviting small and medium enterprises to take part in this initiative with a mission to create an inclusive net zero economy in Indonesia. We wish to use this private-led initiative as a good model for us to expand the green-based project globally. I would like to close by inviting all of you to attend the B20 Summit 2022 this coming November in Bali. B20 as the group that involves more than 2,000 leading businesses and investors in the community from across the globe are ready to drive a concrete global economic transformation, and it would be delighted to have you on board. One thing for sure, we take all of your presence and involvement as a valuable source of information that can be used to improve the B20 and G20 outcomes. I encourage the outcomes to be further implemented with a strong future collaboration and partnership, especially along with those who are participating in today's dialogue. As so many important topics will be discussed this evening, let's move to address the criticism that G20 is much promised, less delivered. Looking forward to see and hear the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Sinta. Next, it is my pleasure to call upon the Chairman of Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or Kadin Indonesia, Bapak Arsyad Rashid. To Pak Arsyad, the screen is yours.
Excellencies and honorable guests, Ibu Shinta Kambani, the coordinating chair of Kadin Indonesia and chair of the B20 Indonesia, Ibu Nika Widiawati, B20 Energy, Sustainability and Climate Task Force Chair and also President Director and CEO PT Pertamina, Mr. Sacha Winzenried, Energy, Utilities and Resource Leaders of PwC Indonesia, Bapak Yanto Kamarudin, Partner, Energy, Utilities and Resource of PwC Indonesia, distinguished attendees and participants of these B20 side events. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, on behalf of Kadin, or the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the organizer of the B20 2022, I would like to wholeheartedly welcome government officials, esteemed business leaders, and distinguished participants for participating in today's dialogue. Today, we will discuss and provide feedback on the first policy recommendation formulated by the Energy, Sustainability and Climate Task Force, accelerating the transition to sustainable energy use. We fully agree that transitioning to clean and sustainable energy is the only way to avoid worsening climate change and global catastrophe. However, several challenges remain, especially in financing this ambitious transition. Capital spending on physical assets for energy and land use system in the net zero transition between 2021 and 2050 would amount to about 275 trillion US dollars, or 9.2 trillion per year on average, an annual increase of as much as 3.5 trillion US dollars from today. Financing this gap requires collaboration from the global world, primarily to assist and support developing nations throughout their net zero journeys. Besides financing, knowledge and technology transfers are also needed to build the capability of new technologies among the stakeholders in developing nations. Take Indonesia as an example. Indonesia will need around 200 gigawatt of additional solar capacity and achieve 100% EV sales shares in the market by 2050. Not an easy feat, but we've seen the shift toward this trend from increasingly pro-green regulation and policies from the government. In support of the sentiment echoed by the government, the organization that I lead, Kadin, or the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, created Net Zero Hub to expedite the process of decarbonization and adopting sustainable energy for the private sectors. Net Zero Hub aims to assist businesses in their decarbonizing journey by providing a knowledge-sharing platform and networking space. Connecting experts with those who are just starting, we aim to harness the power of inclusive collaboration in this platform so businesses of any size can join. In this opportunity, I would like also to invite business leaders attending this session to join the Net Zero Hub. Whether you are just starting or have extensive knowledge of decarbonization, your expertise will be valuable to the communities. Lastly, I hope the dialogue that will take place can provide the task force with insights on the best practices to accelerate the use of sustainable energy that is actionable in a real-world scenario, supporting B20 priorities of realizing inclusive and sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Arsyad. Ladies and gentlemen, next we will listen to the keynote speech that will be delivered by Ibu Nika Widiawati, Chair of the B20 Energy, Sustainability and Climate Task Force and President Director and CEO of PT Pertamina Persero. To Ibu Nika Widiawati, the screen is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, the role of the Energy, Sustainability and Climate Task Force in B20 is to share the views of the business community to support the energy transition agenda through policy recommendation to the G20 leaders. Also, the task force acts as a bridge between business community and stakeholders, as well as to form partnership and collaboration as a catalyst to accelerate the energy transition goals and targets. Energy, Sustainability and Climate B20 team is one of the most ambitious B20 task force with 8 co-chairs from key players of the energy industry and 150 executives from G20 countries. We are also grateful to be supported by knowledge and network partners in formulating the comprehensive policy recommendation and business action. We also include the young generation in the team task force to be involved in the whole process, as we see the important role of the youth in the energy transition. Hence, we expect their contribution in involvement in the task force. The role of business in the energy transition agenda is aligned with Energy Transition Working Group priority issues. The business community is imperative for 3 key pillars of the energy transition, which are: first, securing energy accessibility; second, smart and clean energy technology scale up; and 3, advanced energy financing. From the 3 pillars, we are currently deriving our factors of action, which are translated to the recommendation and action as our 3 key priority of recommendation, which are: the first recommendation is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy use by reducing carbon intensity. This can be achieved by energy efficiency, phase down of inefficient coal power plants, emission mitigation on hard-to-abate sector, ease of financing flow, and climate innovation technologies. Energy efficiency is one of the key pillars to decarbonization. Achieving this requires the combination of adopting energy efficiency, technology, behavioral change, and electrification that G20 countries can support through developing clear government pathways, financial and non-financial incentive, infrastructure development and access, and cross-country and intra-country collaboration. Phase down coal-fired generation and accelerating renewable energy deployment as one way to address global warming and climate change. Carbon emission from coal-fired generation will have to be reduced through multiple ways and must be adjusted based on countries' circumstances. For this initiative, we recommend G20 countries to set up sustainable source biomass supply for biomass co-firing, facilitate the adoption of sustainable ammonia co-firing, CCUS, and motivate the retirement of old inefficient plants and accelerate deployment of renewable energy. We also recommend accelerating carbon emission mitigation from the hard-to-abate sectors of the economy, where government can look at increasing the adoption of biofuels and blue and green hydrogen. Industry incentivization, support for innovation, and devising clear framework and target for this alternative fuel in the future will be key to accelerate the decarbonization of the hard-to-abate sectors. Ease of financing flow from developed country to developing country are very crucial in the clean energy transition. The availability of capital is vital. Financing flow can also be difficult for many developing countries due to lack of data on country-level climate risk and vulnerability data, limited information services that can be used to guide investment decision-making, lack of clarity on the government's capital investment gap to achieving transition goal, and/or where private investment is needed, and low perceived of actual risk-adjusted return on investment. We recommend setting up a public policy to incentivize green investment, enable global coordination, and harmonizing sustainable finance taxonomies, and support the move to global reporting standards that give relevant information to investors and other stakeholders. Climate and innovation technology are critical enablers of delivering climate change successfully. This can be applied to all areas that contribute to carbon emission, like manufacturing, electricity generation, and others. However, each country should consider its own resources and capability to catalyze innovation. Accelerating climate innovation can be supported by establishing clear government pathway and programs, laying out policy and regulation for climate innovation, funding support, and fostering global and international ecosystem model. As such, it will be much appreciated to acquire the support of business community on our recommendation in energy transition through global collaboration to share knowledge and financing for innovating new technology or current technology, such as CCUS, especially for the hard-to-abate sector, renewable and hydrogen technology. Ladies and gentlemen, the second recommendation is to ensure a just, orderly, and affordable transition to sustainable energy use. This can be achieved by addressing 4 key areas: orderly transition primary energy source, medium-small enterprise participation in energy transition, workforce transition readiness, and sustainable mining practice. Orderly transition in primary energy sources is important, as energy transition should not jeopardize energy security. The policy paper has considered alternative energy sources such as natural gas, hydrogen, nuclear power, hydropower, and other depending on the stage of each country, as there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Thus, G20 countries should establish a short-term roadmap to accelerate phase down of carbon intensity fossil fuel, clear nuclear energy policy and application, and global support on developing institutional capacity and government frameworks. Micro, small, and medium enterprise are a crucial component of economic growth in developed and developing countries. They are able to participate in the energy value chain, for example, waste collection for biofuel. Thus, it is crucial that G20 countries promote incentive, funding accessibility, and educational programs to alleviate the finance and capacity constraint faced by micro, small, and medium enterprise who want to participate in energy transition activities. Workforce transition must be accelerated given the rapid pace of climate transition to respond not only to direct job affected but also indirect impact and future workforce. Thus, it is important that G20 countries conduct long-term strategic workforce planning, set up policy and regulation to support inclusive upskilling and timely workforce reskilling for energy transition. This can be enabled by global collaboration and regulatory incentives. The fourth one is on sustainable mining practice. The global attempt on mitigating climate change will require a substantial amount of critical minerals to build clean and low-carbon energy technology. The environmental and social impact from mining activity need to be addressed together with positive government practice in order to help alleviate the adverse impact. Therefore, it is important that G20 countries promote the adoption of globally accepted reporting standards, support funding and incentive to reduce, reuse, recycle, and repurpose in mining, conduct targeted training and upskilling program, and cooperate between countries to accelerate the implementation of sustainable mining practice. As such, it will be much appreciated to acquire the support from the business community through sharing of knowledge, opening up investment and financing opportunity and resources for low-carbon fuel like gas and nuclear, or practice in circular economy will be highly appreciated in order to transition the energy sources in a just and fair manner. Ladies and gentlemen, the third recommendation is to enhance consumer-level access to consume clean, modern energy. This can be supported by deploying integrated energy solutions, clean energy access to household and micro, small, and medium enterprise, and broad-basing of the transition. Deploying integrated electricity access solutions are crucial to expand energy access and enhance economic prosperity. However, they are still lagging electricity access target, especially in developing countries. A combination of key enablers is to be enforced for off-grid and microgrid, such as supportive regulation and policy, robust financing support, and strong community enablement. For grid extension, it is also crucial to consider the implementation of supporting market structure, for example, open access for transition and distribution grid. The quantity of greenhouse gas emitted from home electricity and micro, small, and medium energy consumption are increasing over time, driven by population and economic growth. Thus, the adoption of clean and modern energy should be promoted not only to reduce the greenhouse gas emitted, but also the cost saving benefited by household and micro, small, and medium enterprise. Therefore, G20 countries should support the adoption of clean and modern end-use technology by providing incentive, financing, infrastructure accessibility, upskilling, and awareness program to household and micro, small, and medium enterprises. Broad-basing of the transition, especially across the developing country of the G20 and beyond, will require a range of measures targeted at reducing the cost of the required energy transition investment to address affordability barriers. G20 countries should ring-fence their carbon pricing revenue from fossil fuel subsidy reform, carbon tax, and permit auction for energy transition investment, and earmark a portion of carbon pricing revenue in developed countries for funding a pool of capital to finance energy transition investment in developing countries, and to allow listing and trading of emission reduction generated from projects in developing countries in the emission trading system of developed countries as a way of channeling finance to developing countries. As such, it will be much appreciated to acquire the support from the business community through intra-nation collaboration to accelerate consumer-level access to clean and modern energy solutions, such as affordable energy-efficient technology for household and micro and small medium enterprises can greatly benefit our recommendation. That wraps up the recommendation and policy action from Energy, Sustainability and Climate Task Force. Given the urgency of situation, we need greater vision and ambition and greater commitment to innovate, inclusive, and also collaborative action, and we need it now. Businesses understand this better than most, as the long-term sustainability of our business is linked to the need of our stakeholders. We cannot miss this opportunity to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Nika. Okay, before we continue with our next session, I would like to invite all of you to open your camera and let's take a picture together. I hope everyone has now put their visual background shared earlier, or you can also find the link at the chat box below. So we will start the photo on my cue. We will do several takes so everyone is included. Please be ready on my count. 1, 2, 3. Next round. 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 1, 2, 3. And this is the last round. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. I think everyone here looks great. Distinguished guests, to continue, we will have Bapak Yanto Kamarudin. He is the Energy, Utilities, and Resources Partner at PwC Indonesia. Pak Yanto will share about the energy transition outlook. To Pak Yanto, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Annette. Good evening, Ibu Sinta Kamdani, the Chair of B20 Indonesia, Bapak Arsyad Rashid, the Chairman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or Kadin Indonesia, Chair of the B20 Energy, Sustainability and Climate Task Force, Ibu Nike Widiawati, distinguished panelists, co-chairs of Energy, Sustainability and Climate Task Force members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Yanto Kamarudin, an Energy, Utility and Resources Partner in PwC Indonesia. Continuing what Bu Nike has mentioned in her keynote speech, let me share the energy transition outlook. Currently, there is no corrective. Next slide, please. Next.
Kata siapa? Kata siapa tadi?
Currently, there is no corrective mechanism for climate change. Belum mulai. Mulai ulang lagi. Currently, there is no corrective mechanism for climate change that can be applied post-factor. To avoid catastrophic climate change, the target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial average by the year 2100 must be achieved. We are falling short now, as global average temperature rise currently stand at 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial average. Based on current policy and action, we are on track to hit an increase of 2.7 degrees Celsius. Full implementation of 2030 NDC targets reduces that to 2.4 degrees Celsius. If we consider full implementation of submitted and binding targets and 2030 NDC targets, it further reduces to 2.1 degrees Celsius. Finally, considering the optimistic scenario, including net zero target by 2050, the temperature will still rise by 1.5 degree to 2.4 degrees Celsius with average of 1.8 degrees Celsius. As such, enhanced ambition and matching actions are urgently required to bend the curve. Next, please. Energy transition should be looked at from two angles. Why is the source of energy with high emission and the region with the high emission? Population growth and economic growth are the key drivers of energy consumption. Energy transition is depending on the current energy mix consumed. For the past 5 decades to 2020, the energy consumption has grown for 3.7 times, where 78% were consumed in Asia Pacific, North America, and European regions. The increase in energy demand has been met by coal, gas, and oil. Oil still dominates the energy demand at 33%, followed by coal 27% and gas 24%. Together, they are accounting for 84% of total energy demand. As a result of the increase in energy consumption, the emission grows as well by 3.1 times for the past 5 decades to 2020. The good side is that the increase in emission is lower than the increase in energy consumption because of the significant use of gas in the energy mix. 93% of emissions come from fossil fuel, with the emission from coal account for 40%, despite the energy mix from coal was only 27% of energy mix. Next, please. The growth in energy demand is still expected to be significant in Asia-Pacific region. Currently, Asia-Pacific region consumes 44% of the total energy demand, with 86% energy mix from fossil fuel, including 48% of coal. As such, Asia-Pacific region is currently heavily reliant on coal, which has higher emission compared to other fossil fuel. From the graph, it's clear that Europe and North America are two regions with more advanced positions in terms of the use of renewable energy in the energy mix. Currently, the renewables stand at 21% and 29% of energy mix in North America and Europe, respectively. The coal in North America and European region stand at 9% and 12% only of the energy mix. As such, the focus of phasing down the coal should be in Asia-Pacific region. Next, please. For the past 2 decades, there were massive expansion on coal-fired power plant, particularly in China and India, despite the pace declining in the past few years. The retirement of coal-fired power plants for the past 2 decades in China, India, and Indonesia were far behind the rest of the world. Beyond 2020, it is expected that the retirement of coal-fired power plant will be minimal from China, India, and Indonesia, and the majority of the retirements will be from the rest of the world. Next, please. Consistent with the increase in energy demand, but with the declining pace of coal-fired power plant constructions, the renewable share in new generating capacity increased for the last 2 decades. Even since 2012, the annual renewable generating capacity addition exceeded the non-renewable. However, approximately 80% of investment have been made in America, China, and Europe. As such, investment in the renewable energy need to be expanded beyond those regions to the rest of developing countries in Asia to ensure that global warming and climate change goals remain within reach. Next, please. This lack of investment in renewable energy in other parts of Asia-Pacific region has made some international development agencies such as Eddy to lead program to accelerate retirement of coal-fired power plants. Eddy managed Southeast Asia ETM partnership platform to establish carbon reduction fund, as well as a clean energy fund focusing on Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. The intention of the program is to retire earlier the coal-fired power plants, but at the same time promote investment in renewable energy. Several modalities have been offered, and all of them are being discussed to create a scale-up model to be rolled up to other major Asian countries. In addition to ADB, there are other organizations like World Bank, which offer result-based lending value at $1 to $2 billion to finance the renewable energy. AFD also offered the same thing for financing and technical assistance to prepare energy transitions. Next, please. As we have discussed, coal phase down could be one of the key quick actions to reduce carbon intensity in electricity production, particularly in the Asia-Pacific. However, as mentioned by Bu Nicole, there are other pathways to accelerating the energy transition to a sustainable energy. The first part could be consider the energy efficiency improvement across economy. The increase in the energy usage should be followed with the use of efficient technologies to reduce unnecessary energy demand. The energy efficiency should be applied in all sectors, including industrial, commercial, and as well as residential sectors. Carbon intensity of electricity should also be reduced. We have discussed in a great detail on the need to phase down coal as one of the key quick action to reduce carbon intensity. However, it should be based on national circumstances. During the interim period, there is a need to reduce carbon intensity for electricity before the full deployment of renewable. For example, like the use of biomass or ammonia as co-firing in the coal-fired power plant, or the use of carbon capture storage technology. The use of alternative fuel to mitigate carbon emission from hard to abate sector is another pathway, important pathway. In the short term, a nature-based solution and adoption of circular economy can be used to mitigate carbon emission from hard to abate sectors. In the medium term, increasing adoption of blue hydrogen and biofuel as low carbon fuel can be used as one of alternatives to phase down the use of fossil fuel. Finally, in the long term, decarbonization can be achieved through the sustained adoption of biofuels and green hydrogen. In order to make this work, this should be carried out through incentivized industry for the use of this alternative fuel and supporting innovation to reduce end-to-end costs. Bu Nika has touched a bit about enhancing the quantum predictability and pace of financing flows from developed country to developing country is also an important part. As I've already mentioned, 80% of investment in renewable have been made in China, European, and North American region. The emerging and developing economies receive only 20% of global investments in renewable. In clean energy transition, availability of capital is vital. Many clean energy technology, such as wind, solar PV, and electric vehicle, have relatively high upfront investment requirement. The shift toward a more capital-intensive energy system means that keeping financing costs low will be critical to accelerating energy transition affordability. However, for the moment, capital is significantly more expensive in developing countries than in developed countries. Although there are already existing climate finance commitment aiming to channel 100 billion per year from developed to developing economies, it is yet to be realized and access to developing countries tend to be limited. Accessing international capital markets can also be difficult for many developing countries due to, as Bu Nika already touched a little bit about, among others, a lack of data on country level climate risk and vulnerability data, or lack of clarity on government's capital investment, gap to achieve transition goal, and all where private investment is needed, and low perceived or actual risk-adjusted return on investment. To address these issues, global investors are increasingly calling for high-quality, transparent, reliable, and comparable reporting by companies on climate and ESG matters. As such, there is a need for a comprehensive global baseline of sustainability-related disclosure standard that provide investors with reliable risk and opportunities information to help them making informed investment decisions. This may also allow some comparison between entities in different jurisdictions. The voluntary sustainability standard setter have made significant progress with convergence resulting in several key organizations folding into the IFRS Foundation new International Sustainability Standard Board. Some geographies have been requiring specific sustainability reporting to improve the quality of climate information for user decision-making. However, there are still varying information requirements across jurisdictions with different objectives and areas of focus. This leads to varying interpretation of sustainability-related performance of large corporations as well as small and medium enterprises. Investors and other stakeholders may struggle to identify sustainable financial products due to inconsistent and often voluntary use of many different metrics and standards. Hence, there is a need for comparable and consistent standard of sustainability reporting that encompass both general and sector-specific metrics to allow businesses to build public trust through greater transparency of their sustainability performance. This global reporting standard should consider incorporating and adhering to common but differentiated responsibilities principle as formalized by the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and taking into account respective capabilities of its countries. Further, to accelerate investment in clean energy, in addition to the need of a comprehensive global baseline of sustainability-related disclosure standard, the policy action must be designed in a way that ensures energy system resilience during the transition and avoid underinvestment in specific sectors needed for regional economic growth and affordable energy access. Governance in developing countries could utilize national policy that enhance capacity building action and creating a conducive environment for foreign investment to promote shift towards circular economy in developing countries. Some other possible action worth exploring may include eliminating inefficient subsidies on fossil fuel and other carbon-intensive production, implementing a carbon tax, and introducing a carbon cap and trade system. In addition to enforcing consequences for carbon emission, other policy instruments should also be considered, such as reduce tariff on importing the necessary technologies for green energy projects and investment incentives, tax credit for companies or private investor contributing towards green investment or circular economy related activities. Last but not least, fostering climate innovation across countries is another pathway to accelerate the global ambition to net zero while creating economic value. This can be carried out through a combination of robust knowledge sharing activities, ecosystem building, and financing effects across developed and developing countries. Through the lens of common but differentiated responsibility principle, countries are encouraged to work together, leveraging their different strengths to bridge the climate technology gap. As a conclusion, phase down of coal could be one of the key factors to mitigate climate risk. However, there's other pathway should be carried out concurrently to accelerating the transition to the sustainable energy. This effort may require significant investment to be invested in many developing countries, as well as cooperating among countries to fostering innovation. The energy transition may create massive business opportunities. However, it is important, as Bunika said, the transition should be carried out in a just transition considering the specific situation of each country. Further, the transition should also be carried out to ensure that affordable energy is provided to anyone. No one should be left behind. This is the end of my presentation. I do hope that my presentation can provoke interesting discussion in the next segment. Thank you. I'll hand it over to MC.
Thank you, Pak Yanto. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now let's move on to our panel this session. I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists, Bapak Yudo Dwinanda Priaadi, Bapak Agung Wicaksono, Bapak Zainal Arifin, Ibu Febriany Eddy, Bapak Florian Kitt, Bapak Oki Muraza, and Pak Sacha Winzenried, who will moderate the session. If you have any question to our speakers during the discussion, please submit your questions by scanning the QR code displayed on the screen. Okay, to start the session, let's welcome Pak Sacha and our esteemed panelists. Over to you, Pak Sacha. Sorry, Sacha, are you still on mute?
Thank you. Thank you, Annette. And thank you to all our keynote speakers for those introductions. So it's a pleasure now for me to moderate a discussion with a distinguished panel of experts. Thank you again for joining us, Pak Yudo, Pak Agung, Pak Zainal, Ibu Febriany, Pak Oki, and Florian. Thank you. And to everyone attending the webinar, as mentioned earlier, please feel free to submit your questions through the QR code. But first, I'll start off with a few questions for each of our panelists. So firstly, to Pak Yudo, the G20 Energy Transition Working Group, which you are chairing, is playing a key role in advising on policy responses of the G20 countries to the challenges of the energy transition. I note that there are three key issue areas the ETWG is focusing on in addressing the energy trilemma: securing energy accessibility, scaling up smart and clean energy technologies, and also advancing energy financing. And it's pleasing to note that these focus areas are very much aligned with the B20 ESC focus areas. So it seems government and business are on the same page. So that's always good. So firstly, Pak Yudo, I'd like to ask you what you see as the key contribution the ETWG can make in this debate as part of the G20 Indonesia presidency. And what would you see as a successful outcome from your working group for this presidency? So, Pak Yudo, thank you.
Thank you. Pak Sacha, Pak Ibu Sinta, Bu Nika, all the speakers and participants. Thank you for inviting me as the chair of ETWG. G20 ETWG 22 have been advancing this debate actually by deeply observing the core issues of energy transition. We fully consider legacies from the previous G20 presidencies, from dozens of issues, reduced to each half, and then coming up with three broad issues: accessibility, technology, and financing, like you mentioned. Let me give you some example. For example, is the issue on energy access. We have become this become a low-hanging fruit actually for all G20 members, and continuously developed and addressed throughout G20 presidencies. There are still around 2.6 billion people without clean cooking access, and around 759 million without energy access. So number is still very, very big. G20, as the largest energy producer and consumers of energy, will have to take responsibility for providing this solution. This is one of the greatest homework. We call this decade of action, the latest decades to 2030 SDGs, as well as in the global post-pandemic recovery. The working group tagline, energy transitions, have been firstly introduced since G20 Agenda 2018. In G20, just to give you some key information actually, we say energy transitions always in plural form in G20, meaning that every country has different pathways in doing their own transition. I heard many times, about national context, national circumstances, those things that relevant. Why we agree as a group, use energy transition in plural form. We see, that enormous attention and expectation from all stakeholders in transitioning towards clean and sustainable energy. Continuing the impactful outcome from previous presidency in this year, Indonesia, through its energy transition pillar, will expect the outcome of more resilient and sustainable global energy architecture. The outcome will be addressed to the ETWG key developers, the communique, of course, and its annexes. With these key developers, we expect to strengthen update, compile, solidify the previous G20 legacies with current context, where all G20 members have declared their respective net zero emission target by around mid-centuries. Actually, this is the first year after all of us, G20 as a group, have issued our respective net zero emission. Some countries call it carbon neutrality or low carbon emission plans. So for G20, this is the beginning year of implementation towards our respective goals. In these deliverables, we aim to deliver the priorities, accessibility, technology, and financing, while addressing the importance of resilient global energy systems to reflect the time of crisis and strengthening effort to achieve global goals. Climate will always be global goals, and partnership for just, affordable, reliable, sustainable energy. So this is a brief story about our development. It's going to be a short communique. We are focusing on implementation. Again, this is the first year of the beginning year of implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. And very interesting the point you make that, and obviously there are some diplomats involved in your group, because the point that this is actually energy transitions as plural and not just an energy transition is a very key point, with different parts of the world on a different timetable, I think, in the energy transition. You did touch on this a little bit, but I just wanted to follow up with a question on what role you think the G20 can play in making sure that no one is left behind in this energy transition, what is often referred to as a just transition. So how can the G20 make sure that developing economies, and this is the first year that a developing economy is chairing the G20, I think, the developing economies can have access to the same technological innovation and sources of funding available to developed economies. Do you see a role for the G20 in this?
Yes, leaving no one behind is the key spirit of Agenda 2030 SDGs, right? Especially SDG 7, the energy part that is brought into G20 ETWG focuses for years. A report from Sea4All said that we need $4.4 billion annually to close access gap. This is the first year that ETWG bring the issue of financing. Right. Yes, we have finance track. We work closely with them. We, ETWG, want to say boldly that successful energy transitions do need huge sum of money. Without adequate funding, we can predict the end game of energy transition and later on how successful we deal with climate change. We need all funding resources, public, private, philanthropists, also green funding, and hence the framework to attract more funding and investment is absolutely critical. Next, technology. Clearly, we need better access of various clean technology. Some of them already in the market, some still under development, like carbon capture, hydrogen, ammonia, and storage, to name the few. Technology is also the key aspect if you want to enhance energy efficiency. Continuing the leaving no one behind issues, there is also an interesting issue to deal with this, with the discussion about energy poverty and also the moderate energy minimum standard, 1,000 kilowatt hour per capita. So something that some of us call this beyond SDG 7. This new interesting development, will relate to global population, both in developing countries and developed countries. So this year, we have discussed energy access with a different perspective, that in the past, this is the issue mainly for developing countries. But, because we are facing a very difficult situation right now, so suddenly, many developed countries also say that energy access also become our issue right now, meaning that talking about energy poverty, talking about speaking about welfare, there also should be a minimum energy standard Again, 1,000 kWh per capita is the main standard for for developing countries.
Yeah.
This demonstrates how G20 actually will always put emphasis on leaving no one behind value. Echoing voices from ETWG meeting, we need to accelerate energy transition as well as maintaining energy security. We need to build momentum to cooperate, then collaborate. Next level is partnership. There is also an interesting, development to set up partnership, to assure successful energy transition, including, this is the key part, commitment for technologies and funding, while showing stronger climate ambition between developing and developed countries. However, I should be noted that creating just and affordable energy transition surely be the main criteria. Despite the current situation in this year, as we have seen from global crisis, we expect that this year ETWG developers could become the milestone advanced and updated in the next presidency, especially energy market and developing economies, which will be hosted next year India, next again Brazil, and then 3 years from now South Africa. So that's the short answer that I can give, Pak Sacha.
Yeah.
Last question, I want to apologize that I have another discussion to join. If you allow me, Pak Sacha, in the next 10 minutes, I need to leave this discussion.
I understand, Pa. And thank you very much for sharing your time. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pa Yudo. So next, I would like to move to Pa Zainal Arifin at PLN, Pa. Pa Zainal, PLN as the state power utility for Indonesia, of course, has been tasked with a significant role in the energy transition for Indonesia, namely supporting the government's target of 23% new and renewable energy in the energy mix by 2025, which would include some phase down of coal-fired power, and also the net zero target by 2060 that Indonesia has set. So what I'd like to ask you firstly is what do you see as the biggest challenges for PLN in playing its part in achieving these targets? Is it technology? Is it funding? Or is it something else?
Okay, first of all, I would like to apologize that Pak Wiluyo is still on a business trip right now, so he cannot join the event. Okay, I will answer the question based on an off-taker perspective. Basically, the energy transition will be smooth if the energy market is in a good condition. For example, you can look how the Russia-Ukraine war has affected the energy transition and initiative in Europe. Because the market of energy has been disrupted, even some European countries beg to use fossil fuel. So the good market means there is a balance between supply and demand. Based on the market, we have 4 situations. The first, high demand over supply. The second, high demand deficit supply. The third, low demand deficit supply. And the worst case, the fourth, low demand over supply. We ever had this condition last 2 years during pandemic. Right now, Indonesia, PLN has 2 situations of market. Actually, demand is already increased over than 5%, but still over supply. This market exists in Jawa, Madura, Bali, Sumatra, and Kalimantan. For this region, it's very difficult to build a new capacity, whatever technology, because the market is already crowded. The market cannot absorb the supply anymore. Another situation, market is high demand and the supply will deficit. It will happen in Sulawesi, Maluku, Papua, and Nusa Tenggara. This is a good opportunity to build a new power generation, especially renewable energy. So the first challenging issue we have is not all market of energy in Indonesia support for renewable energy development. The next challenging issue is, we call it the basic dilemma energy: reliability, affordability, and sustainability. As utility company, we do not only provide electricity in a sufficient supply, but it should be reliable. We know we need electricity 24 hours, then PLN should supply the reliable electricity anytime. It is a challenge for renewable energy, especially solar and wind. But for this case, I think technology will be a solution, like energy storage, such as battery, hydrogen, pumped storage, and so on. But it will create a new challenge because not only reliable, but PLN should provide electricity at affordable price. We are not low to produce electricity by expensive or too high cost. It is not good for the competitive advantage of our industry. It also can increase inflation because the electricity is one of raw material for all industries and basic need for our people. Then, instead reliable, affordable, we should provide electricity in sustainable way. I think all renewable energy already solved this issue. So, the conclusion, what the big challenge issue of PLN for developing renewable energy to support energy transition in Indonesia consists of two things. First, not all energy market in Indonesia can absorb a new renewable energy development. So we cannot build renewable energy anywhere in Indonesia. And the second, not all renewable energy able to answer the basic dilemma energy, reliable, affordable, and sustainable. So we should do a selection which renewable energy is suitable with the dilemma energy for a certain location. I think that's the basic challenging we have.
No, I think you hit on the key point of the energy trilemma, right? Trying to balance between the sustainability targets at the same time as reliability and affordability, which is still very important for the market. But at the same time, the government has set targets for increasing the renewable energy in the mix and then also in net zero targets. So there are going to be challenges there. I think one thing you did mention is that there's certain markets in Indonesia which are open for renewable energy. What about the infrastructure in place? Is this a challenge for PLN as well, preparing the electricity grid for more intermittent power from renewables? Is that a significant challenge that you're facing?
Yes, it is also one of our challenging, technically. So not only build a new power generation, but as well as the electricity grid. Basically, in order to connect well with all renewable energy sources, the electricity grid should have high flexibility. It means we need to improve our grid to be a smart grid. And also, for dealing with the intermittency, we should provide some technology like energy storage. So not only for the power generation itself, but also for other related technology like smart grid and also energy storage like this.
Yeah, and this is where we start to talk about significant capital expenditure costs as well, right, on some of these new technologies. One final question for you, but where do you see the role of private investors, such as independent power producers or other financial investors, in supporting PLN in achieving these targets for energy transitions? Where can the private investors help the most?
Indeed, for developing renewable energy, PLN cannot work alone. We have limited finance, so developing renewable energy needs support and cooperation of all parties, all stakeholders, investors, developers, lenders, technology provider, innovator, off-taker, and so on to realize the program. Basically, PLN open for everyone, to all investors, both local and foreign companies, for developing renewable energy in all capacity, of course, for the right market, the right location in Indonesia. We welcome everyone to join for developing renewable energy development, not only for the renewable energy generation, but also the electricity grid development, and also other supported technologies such as energy storage. The most important thing is the renewable energy project should be viable, feasible, and bankable.
Yeah, thank you very much. But I think there may be some more questions for you later from the audience, but thank you for that. Florian, I'd like to move to you now, since your role at ADB is quite relevant to this discussion on supporting public utilities in the energy transition, particularly emerging economies. In addition to increasing the supply of renewable energy, it will be important for a phase down over time in fossil fuels in the power production, particularly in coal-fired power, which supplies the majority of power generation in many parts of the world, including Indonesia. The need for a phase down in coal-fired power was highlighted at COP26, and it's also discussed in the B20 ESC task force policy paper. So maybe could you explain briefly how the ADB is looking at supporting the phase down in coal-fired power in Southeast Asia, for instance, i.e. through the energy transition mechanism or other initiatives? And how will this support state utilities such as PLN, particularly in developing economies?
Thank you for that question, Sacha. And thanks to the organizers for the invitation. It's really good to see all of you here, and the very fruitful and forward-looking discussions on how we address one of the key problem of our times in the energy sector, but also beyond that. I think, Sacha, I will try my best to keep it short. This is normally a 20 to 30 page PowerPoint presentation. As you said, we launched at COP26 the Energy Transition Partnership jointly with Indonesia and the Philippines, and we're currently piloting that mechanism in Indonesia and the Philippines. I would like to add that this is under the umbrella of the just transition, so we're not working in a vacuum, but really under the G7 and G20 umbrella, and we're very thankful for Yudo and ASDM for the leadership in the Energy Transition Working Group, as well as to our friends on the Ministry of Finance in the Sustainable Finance Working Group. How is the ETM going to work? I think the basic answer is it's a financial mechanism that will use the difference in cost of capital to shorten the lifetime of the PPAs of the IPPs. So the very basic idea of that is use cheap concessional financing to via debt financing, could also be equity, to basically buy out the expected profits and close plants 5 to 10 years earlier. It's very plant specific in that way because it depends on the original financing structures and on the availability. In that sense, on this first leg of the energy transition mechanism, there is a role for obviously the IFIs such as the ADB, the World Bank, the big bilateral donors, philanthropic capital, as well as the private sector. ADB is just trying to coordinate that and provide a pilot and how that would work. We don't have the money alone to stem the immense needs of the power sector in coal generation, just in Southeast Asia or beyond. Now, you're rightfully asking, how does that work with public utilities, where also the structures of the generation are a bit different. With PLN, we're in very intense discussions, and there are a number of models currently. One is to basically use our traditional modalities. You mentioned, I think, in the beginning, results-based lending, project financing, as well as others that could provide capital towards the clean energy needs of PLN. In exchange, under results-based loan as a KPI or a trigger, PLN would phase down some of the oldest coal-fired power plants first. So then we could also up that game once we've learned. I want to add that this is very new. It's not something that we have done before. So we're and the team is really on a steep learning curve. And we hope that we can bring towards the Leaders Summit some of the first transactions to showcase how this can work and that it can work. On that basis, then we would target obviously more coal-fired power plants with more actors and really bring more ambition to the table. Let me stop here.
Yeah, no, so that's interesting. So, I mean, in some ways, it seems counterintuitive, right, to finance phasing down of an existing facility. But when you explain it as phasing down older, perhaps less efficient, higher, carbon emitting coal-fired power plants, at the same time as providing results-based financing for renewables, I mean, that could be the key, I guess. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. So, I mean, as you also mentioned, no, I think it wasn't you, as Pagianto explained. I mean, there are two funds under this, right? There's the Carbon Reduction Fund, the CRF, and there's the Clean Energy Investment Fund. So they should be, on the one hand, financing a phase down of coal-fired generation, and on the other hand, invest in renewable capacities. That you can either do on a market basis, right, with a GP structure, and that goes for the private sector or market-based plants, while for the non-market-based plants, you would use more traditional ADB modalities. I noted that there are currently also some other ideas or more ideas floating around. So we're really in a very dynamic environment. We're discussing with the different ministries in the different countries, the utilities, as well as a number of financiers on what can work best and how could it work. And then we really need to look at the specific plant in question. Depends on the age, rightfully, as you said, the efficiencies or the level of emissions, how much are we saving? We're looking at bringing carbon financing into this. You noted it's not, currently envisioned in the carbon financing world that you would finance coal and get credits for that. So that's also a new discussion. And that will be very important because in the end, it really depends on the cost of financing. Yeah. So the more cheaper finance we can bring, the earlier we can shut down a plant. That also structures why we're first targeting the older, or like in the IPP sector, in the market sector, mid-age plants, because if you look at, let's say, the newest plants, they're simply too expensive.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think very interesting, and I think, as you said, it's a discussion that probably deserves a whole separate webinar because there's a lot of factors to consider there. Thank you, Florian. Ibu Febriany, I'd like to move to you now because, as we've discussed, there's two key factors in improving sustainability of the energy sector: accelerating the use of sustainable energy, such as renewables, but also reducing the carbon emissions from fossil fuels. So mining companies like Vale have a very important role in the transition in both of these respects, actually. So firstly, in reducing their own carbon footprint, and secondly, in supplying the huge amount of critical minerals such as nickel, lithium, copper, etc., that are needed for the energy transition. So first of all, I'd like to ask you about that first point. Perhaps you'd like to explain the initiatives that Vale is taking to reduce its own carbon emissions in its operations from your perspective.
Thank you. Thanks, Sacha. And thank you for the organizer for the opportunity to speak in today's event. To address such questions, let me share with you what we have done and what we are doing today and what we are committed to do. So the past, the present, and future. Today, our Sorako operations carbon intensity is around 28 tons per ton of nickel produced. It is one of the lowest carbon intensity RKF plant in Indonesia. We are at the first quartile among all the sub-pellet producers in the world. So this is possible because we own, operate, and maintain 3 hydroelectric dams, which we built in 1978, 1999, and 2011. Together, these 3 hydro dams power 100% of our need for electric furnace. Despite these well positions, we are committed to continuously reduce our emission. So last year, we attended COP26 in Glasgow, and we announced our low carbon commitment. At the same time, we announced our carbon reduction roadmap. So we're committing to reduce our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 33% in 2030 and achieving net zero by 2050. Our roadmap, among others, are obviously easiest way is to improve energy efficiency in all aspects of our business. And then the second one is electrifications of our equipment. So our nickel is to produce battery for electric vehicles. So we believe we also need to electrify all of our equipment. So in 2019, we replaced our fuel-based boiler with electric boiler. The boiler used excess hydropower that we have. It helped us reduce carbon by around 33,000 tons per annum. With this success, we are now converting the second boiler to electric boilers. We hope to commission by early 2024. And in terms of truck and light vehicle, February this year, we had the first electric car arriving in Sorako. And last week, I was very happy to be in Sorako, also inaugurating the first electric truck that arrived in Sorako. So these 2 units are our pilot. We need to study the reliability, productivity, and others so we can design the right infrastructure to support all of these electric vehicles. The aim is obviously to convert all the vehicles to electric base. Together, this initiative alone will help us reduce 200,000 tons of carbon emissions per year. Altogether, this will reduce about 10% of carbon emission. Now, the biggest carbon reductions roadmap we have is coming from switching energy source in our dryer and kiln, which today are still using coal and fuel. We aim to convert to LNG. We fully recognize this is not the ultimate solutions, but rather intermediary solutions. These conversions will help us achieve 2030 goal, but not the net zero, obviously. So we will then have to work on this. The last point is about biomass. So we are completing already our lab test and pilot scale tests for biomass as a reductant in our reduction kiln. Now we are moving toward commercial testing. We hope to do this live testing around Q4 this year and early next year to obtain more comprehensive data to allow for sustainable conversions of all the reductants using biomass. So all of these are the key initiative. Obviously, there are a lot of other initiatives, but these are the major ones that will help us achieve our 2030 target.
Yeah, thank you, Febriany. It's very interesting to hear that we already have electric vehicles on mine sites in Indonesia. I mean, that's good news, and I think that should also make PLN happy. I think that there's more electric vehicles being used across the country. But it actually links to a point. I've seen one of the questions come in from the audience that from Pak Nugroho, I think it is. That it's interesting that we talk about electric vehicles, but while we're still producing the electricity using fossil fuels, the emissions are still there effectively, right? So I think it just highlights the need for the acceleration of the energy transition to reduce the fossil fuel components. But at the same time, if we're moving things to electric, that transition will be so much faster, right? Because the vehicles are all ready to, once we switch over to more renewables in the energy mix. So I think that's probably the way Vale is looking at it globally as well, right? To get as much as possible onto electrics. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, Sacha, we also have a greenfield project, right? As you know, probably public information. All of our greenfield projects, we are committed not to use coal. So it's more expensive, obviously, but I mean, it's consistent with our low carbon commitment. So there will be no more new investments in coal-based energy.
Okay, and in fact, your mine site in Sorowako has historically, one of the first hydropower users in significant industry in Indonesia, right? So it's also a pioneer in that way. So from many years ago. So it's good. The second point I want to ask you about is in respect to critical minerals, so where Vale is clearly a key player. So, I mean, in PwC's recently released mine report, which we titled A Critical Transition, we also highlighted the risk that underinvestment in these minerals, which are essential to the energy transition, could actually delay or even jeopardize the timetable that's been set by the globe for the net zero targets. So, for example, a solar power farm requires 3 times the minerals of a similar sized coal-fired power plant, or a wind farm 13 times that of a gas-fired plant. So clearly there is going to be a need for more mining and more minerals. So what do you see as the key constraints to more investment by mining companies in these critical minerals, and whether that be nickel or any of the others? And how will mining companies balance this increasing demand with, at the same time, trying to meet the ESG requirements that investors are putting on mining companies?
Okay, thank you. Very good questions. I mean, to answer the questions, I'll step back a little bit. I think if we look at the previous decade, 10, 15 years ago, indeed, the industry has suffered from extended period of low commodity prices and hence low investment. I mean, I came from nickel industry. I can speak a bit more about it. I mean, nickel has been suffering for a very low nickel price for at least 10 years. So only in the last couple of years, the price really has came out. New demand for critical minerals to back these global decarbonizations is clearly there. This is a great opportunity for us. but at the same time, it's a great challenge. I think the industry is undoubtedly running to respond. There have been a lot of interest investing and cooperating. A lot of people reaching out to us about developing nickel resources. So I think this is great, but it comes with the challenge as well, right? But I like to highlight that we must remember this new investment must be an ESG-backed investment, because these investments are made to address climate issues and decarbonization. Therefore, the entire process must be a sustainable process. Now, a lot of people challenge me, what do you mean, right? Is it possible for mining company to have a sustainable process? Now, let me highlight the challenges and also a few opportunities to look at. I think from environmental, let me break down ESG. So from an environmental point of view, I think availability and viability of low carbon energy option is very central. As I mentioned before, we're trying to decarbonize the world, but then if the process is very high carbon intensive, then it is no point, right? So one of the biggest challenges is to find low carbon energy options. We are one of the most, I think, hard to abate industry because we need the scale and we need also reliability, very high reliability. Therefore, I think, as I mentioned before, in our roadmap, we focus on transitions to natural gas first as an intermediary solutions, or waiting for ultimate solution. Hopefully, yeah. I mean, Vale globally put aside $6 billion in funding to look at low carbon options, and hopefully we can tap on some of the achievement later on. And then obviously now there's a lot of pressure also to look at low carbon processing technology. I mean, today, if you look at Indonesia, laterite ore, we have two types of processing technology, RKF and HPAL. RKF is typically traditionally to support stainless steel, not so much for decarbonization. However, it alone is a very carbon intensive technology. We're lucky I think in Soraka, we have the options to go for hydro. And then the next process is HPAL. HPAL is relatively new compared to RKF. There are not many yet proven technology, but I think we're grateful to say that in Indonesia today, we have at least 2 successful HPAL running. But the challenge with HPAL is, I think it's relative. The good thing about HPAL is relatively low carbon compared to RKF because it's not so much energy intensive. However, the biggest challenge with HPAL is the tailing management. So on the environmental side, there's also big, massive challenge when it comes to tailing management. And then HPAL requires a lot of water. So of course, sustainability environment, you talk about water too. And when you look at nickel resources in Indonesia, mostly in Sulawesi, Maluku, and Halmahera, right? These are the places home to very special endemic. So biodiversity is another challenge. So if you look at from these perspectives, quite a bit to address. And then social challenge, I think something that we probably didn't talk as much as we talk about environmental issue, but it should never be undermined. I think social nowadays, I think globally and also nationally, there's increasing focus on human rights issue, land acquisitions and resettlement. Everything needs to be done in a careful and respectful way. And this is obviously required more time to resolve sometimes, right? So I think any technological breakthrough that could reduce carbons and tailing management would definitely helpful. And I think from personal experience, I think we will require to work closely with government. So government support is very key. When it comes to community, I think business community need to be more open, willing to have a more open, transparent dialogue with the community and really be genuine about finding the agreed solutions. Often I see that businesses are still looking for short-term solutions, bandit solution. But I think it is not easy, but if there is a genuine intent of working together, I think there is a possible solutions. And the next point I think comes to challenges also, most of mining and processing investment involve long project time, right? Project lead time and then high investment upfront. So given this, I think we need very good investment climate, particularly political and regulatory certainty. And then obviously good access to cheap financing, right? Because I mean, this whole energy transitions is very expensive globally. So availability of cheap financing will be key there. And lastly, I'd like to mention that a commodity price is always highly volatile in nature. So this is also a major challenge. I think if we look at all of the challenges that I mentioned that we're dealing with, there is a fair expectation, obviously, from the shareholders to have a decent overall economic return too. And last point, shareholders, I guess, need to be more patient when it comes to dividend, as we are entering into very high investments period for at least the next decade. Yeah. So hopefully it sum up the questions.
Thank you very much, Bu Febri. I mean, you really highlighted what some of the balancing act that has to be made by business these days in being able to address some of these key issues, but at the same time as dealing with ESG concerns, and particularly for mining companies, where it's almost becoming the most important part of the business is building the trust with society and maintaining your license to operate. And that really encapsulates all of this, including the transition to sustainable energy usage. There were a couple of questions from the audience around just the point you made about there's almost no point in talking about an energy transition if the minerals are not produced sustainably themselves, right? So there were a few points on that, and I think that's going to become a key issue for industry, whether that's in Indonesia or elsewhere, because when you see some of the customers of the mining companies, whether that be a Tesla or a Ford or somebody else, they're demanding to see the supply chain and how that mineral was produced today if they're going to use it in batteries for electric vehicles. So a big challenge, I think, coming forward. Thank you for that, Ibu Febri. I'd like to move to Pak Agung. Pak Agung, as the Deputy Chair of the ESC Task Force, you've had an integral role in developing our policy paper, and also in your role at Jababeka, which is involved in industrial estates. You see some of the challenges at first hand, because clearly one of the business cases with industrial estates is reliability of power supply is one of your key points. So perhaps you could give your views on the challenges for the private sector in developing the capabilities to support the energy transition, and where do you see the biggest challenges coming from? Is it the access to technology, or is it obtaining the financing, or perhaps how Jababeka is dealing with this?
Okay, thank you, Sacha, for the opportunity, and I'd like to appreciate PwC as our knowledge partner for organizing this side event of B20. So you're right, Sacha, I'm here both on behalf of the B20 Task Force of ESC, as well as during the day, my job is managing the largest industrial estate in Indonesia through Jababeka. So obviously the presence of a private company like Jababeka in the task force is also very important, because it reflects the view of the private sector with the leadership of Ibu Nike as the CEO of the state-owned company. And if you ask me, for the private sector, what are the biggest challenges? So actually, we match between what Pak Yudo has mentioned from the EPWG. There are three key issues that become the priority for G20 on energy transition. That is access, technology, and financing. So in the private sector side, in B20, we mirror those three aspects with the three factors that has been outlined by Ibu Nike, which is one, the acceleration to transition to sustainable energy use, which is we're discussing tonight. And then secondly, I think, which is very also important for the private sector, is about just an energy transition. And in this context, I think one of the biggest challenges is how to reach out and make sure that companies which belongs to the micro, small, and medium enterprises are being part of the solution as well. So precisely the no one left behind adagium should be accommodated here. And between technology and financing, I think we have seen the discussion how, for example, when it comes to the issue of technology, there are actually potential solutions like, for example, CCS or CCUS, which is obviously, when you talk about fossil fuel and hard to abate sector, this is one of the solutions. And later on, maybe Pak Oki from Pertamina can also outline how Pertamina has been working on this, also including during this B20 initiative. But the financial aspect, how to make this technology workable. And we have heard from Pak Zainal as well from PLN. You know, when it comes to technology, actually everything is there, it's available. But how to make sure the technology is viable, feasible, and bankable? And therefore, I actually welcome very much the solution that was proposed by ADB, my good friend here, Florian, how the energy transition mechanism, ETM, as a possible solution on how private sector can be part of this energy transition. Because otherwise, those three factors that was mentioned, so acceleration to sustainable energy use, and then orderly and affordable transition, and at last, the issue of accessibility would be a challenge if this is not being solved. So if you look at Jamabeka, so what we are doing right now as an industrial estate that house more than 1,800 companies, and many of those companies are renewable energy 100 companies who are demanding to us, as their host, that renewable energy is being provided. So therefore, we are trying to work together, of course, with companies, PLN, obviously, as the state utility company, but there are also two private power producer in our area, in trying to make sure that renewable energy solution can be available for our tenants, those renewable energy 100 companies, as well as other companies that has an aspiration on renewable energy. And I think, therefore, working with companies like Pertamina, for example, Pertamina Power Indonesia, as a follow-up of a MOU that was signed between Jamabeka and Pertamina, would be one of the steps, in order to facilitate, how these RE100 companies would be able to get their source of energy. So that is, I think, where we are right now, Sacha, and this actually sum up how, as we have seen also in the process, how the B20 always put both policy recommendation and business action into perspective. So what we are working right now, what has been presented by Monica, was the policy recommendation and how to make business action, like what we are doing right now with the renewable energy solution, for example, is a loop, in order to make sure that the solution can be achieved.
Yeah, no, thank you, Agung. I think that encapsulates a lot of the key points about the way the private sector is looking at the energy transition, right? Because decarbonization is going to need to occur right throughout the economy, whether that's the state utility or in this case, the decarbonization of industrial estates. Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, we have Pak Oki Muraza here from Pertamina. Pak Oki, as the policy manager for the ESC task force, you've actually driven the process of developing this policy paper. And also in your work in research, technology and innovation at Pertamina, you will no doubt play a role in implementing some of the key recommendations at least in Indonesia. So other than increasing the role of renewables in the energy mix to accelerate the transition, there are, of course, other important initiatives to reduce carbon emissions, particularly in the hard-to-abate areas. So what do you see as the role for new technologies, such as hydrogen and nature-based solutions, such as biofuels, etc.? And while increasing investments in renewables and the phase-down in fossil fuel use may be short-term gains, what do you see as the role for some of these developing technologies over the longer term?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sacha. Everyone, this evening. So basically, to answer your questions, I would like to echo some of the lecture or speech that we have this evening. Pak Yudo and also Pak Agung mentioned that there is no one solution fits all in this energy transition, and we can see that all technologies will contribute in the long term for the global energy transitions. And especially for the Pertamina, we can consider that for hard-to-abate sectors, we have multiple technologies. The first one is the biofuels. We can see that in the short to long-term solutions, biofuels will be the answer for heavy-duty transportations, for aviation. Yeah, we learned that now many countries are trying to develop SAF, sustainable aviation fuels, and also in the energy intensive industries, yeah, such as mining. Yeah, Bu Febri mentioned about the role of energy transition in mining, cement, and also steel. And the use of biofuels also will fill the gap for technology readiness, yeah, that we expect in other sectors, such as in the battery development, etc. And we can also see that the biofuels is also sustainable solutions when we can use waste as a feedstock. For instance, now we are developing the second generation bioethanol from empty fruit bunch, EFB. And also we are trying to search for security of supply from used cooking oil, yeah, for biofuels. And the second technology which will be expected is in the hydrogen production. Yeah, this is already part of the carbon neutral roadmap, and also in the Pertamina strategic initiatives. We can see that hydrogen is gaining momentum everywhere, especially Japan already stated that they are expecting to have 3 million ton per year, then 20 million. Yeah. And then globally, we can see that blue hydrogen is coming soon, yeah, prior to green hydrogen, due to the still relatively high cost of electrolyzer, and also the availability of low-cost natural gas, especially in Middle East. And domestically in Indonesia, Pertamina is engaging with several companies in order to produce blue hydrogen, benefiting that we are having the depleted reservoir and also saline formations available for CCUS, which will enable the blue hydrogen. And we have the geothermal power for green hydrogen. The third solution will come from the natural carbon solution here, as we are basically one of the country with the large forest area. Basically, this natural-based solution, or NBS, will create a pathway in delivering investment in nature to Indonesia, where we can have carbon credits, etc. And the last technology that we are expecting is basically carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Yeah, this is also a very hot topic nowadays. Many developed countries are trying to develop low-cost technology for direct air capture. And in Indonesia, we can see that CCUS is playing an important role, as we are one of the country in Asia Pacific with the largest CO2 storage capacity from depleted reservoirs, not counting yet the saline formations. We will expect that CCUS will play an important role in decarbonizations and also in reaching net zero. So that's why Pertamina already started some initiatives with some partners in order to have CCUS, be it for CO2 enhanced power recovery and also storage. Yeah. So taking into account that these technologies are still in the development stage, yeah, we would like to highlight that the climate technology research and innovations is basically the critical enabler for the energy transitions. So we expect that there will be global support in a way that global ecosystem models in which will support the innovations, and suitable regulatory frameworks also in order to accelerate the decarbonization in all sectors by technology. Thank you, Sacha.
Thank you very much, Pak Oki. I think you've given us a good picture of some of the longer-term initiatives that need to be focused on if we're going to be really successful in the energy transition. I've just been looking at some of the questions that came in from the audience, and I think we've actually covered most of the topics in our discussion. There's one area I wanted to follow up with Pa Agung, though. Pa Agung is around the general, what can be the role towards, net zero through decarbonisation in industrial clusters and the industrial sector as a whole?
Yeah, thank you, Sacha. I think that's a valid point. So we're talking about how to achieve net zero emission as a country. So we see Indonesia has set to 2060 as the target. And obviously, the industrial clusters also play a role here, because we all know that the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius was set to be, or based on the baseline prior to the industrial era. So how then, industrial estates like Jababeka and other estates in the world should play a role here? I think it's very important. So there is a community called transitioning in the industrial cluster toward net zero. And I think estates like Jababeka being part of the B20 initiative, as well as being part of this effort toward net zero emission, Jababeka should, and many other industrial estates in Indonesia should be part of this initiative that is currently being set by the World Economic Forum on how we transition industrial cluster toward net zero. So many agenda are on the table, both with regard to systemic efficiency, renewable energy generation, as well as how to create social values. And this is, I think, very much in line with the three factors that the B20 has put as a recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pa. And I think that is very relevant to the B20 ESC task force findings. And as you say, what we put on the table. It's also very relevant to the economic development initiatives of large archipelagic countries like Indonesia, which are trying to spread the GDP development across the country, which is through industrial estates and industrial clusters, right? And I think and just like when we talk about the new capital city, it's an opportunity to start with renewable energy from day one, right? In some of these areas, and it can be a big part of the transition. So I think your point is very well made, and that association and grouping sounds like a very good opportunity for the private sector to get heavily involved in the transition. So thank you for that. So I think we've run out of time. So I would like to thank all of our panelists, Pa Yudo, Pa Agung, Pa Zainal, Ibu Febriany, Pa Oki, and of course Florian from the ADB. So thank you for joining us. I think it was a stimulating conversation, and I hope you found it a good use of your time. I'm sure you will receive questions and comments from the many people that have joined, because I think we had over 300 to 400 people at one point. So there were a lot of people tuning in. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank all the speakers we had today. Thank you for your time. I think our discussion today has highlighted the key challenges and opportunities for the acceleration of sustainable energy use, as discussed in the B20 Energy Sustainability and Climate Task Force's policy paper, which will be submitted to the G20 governments for consideration in policy making. So once again, thank you all for attending. I hope you all stay healthy and well. Thank you. I pass back to the MC.
Thank you, Pak Sacha. Distinguished guests, Bapak dan Ibu yang terhormat, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached to the end of the webinar today. We had the opportunity to listen to thoughtful discussions and intriguing insights from all of our respectable speakers. Please do reach out to us if there's anything from today's session that you wish to discuss further. Now, before we close this webinar, we would like to ask for your time to please fill in the feedback form by scanning the QR code on the screen. If you have any questions or topics to further discuss, you can also put them in the feedback form or contact us directly. There will also be a certificate of attendance shared with you after the submission of the form. After this event concludes, we will be playing the announcement video for the top 10 finalists of the Energy, Sustainability and Climate International Essay Competition. For those of you who are interested to watch the announcement, please stay tuned. And we want to congratulate all the top 10 finalists of the Energy, Sustainability and Climate International Essay Competition that will be proceeding to the final presentation round on the 20th of August. So on behalf of the B20 ESC Task Force, we would like to thank all of our guests and speakers for joining this event. It has been a wonderful night. I'm Anat Lingabito. Thank you and see you at the next event.
Satu Indonesia, or Astra's unified spirit for Indonesia, exemplifies Astra's active role and contribution in the pursuit of nurturing the people of Indonesia. It brings every commitment, venture, and work under a common framework and creates added values for the nation's progress. Throughout the years, since founded in 1957, Astra has consistently shown real contribution, dedicated to move Indonesia forward. As a company, Astra has grown and today manages over 180,000 employees and over 200 subsidiaries across the archipelago. In line with one of Astra's corporate philosophy, Catur Dharma values, to be an asset to the nation, Astra has an unwavered commitment to social contributions for Indonesia. The company's endeavors in this regard are designed to be effective and robustly structured, identifying 4 pillars of Astra untuk Indonesia Sehat, Astra untuk Indonesia Cerdas, Astra untuk Indonesia Hijau, and Astra untuk Indonesia Kreatif. Supported by 9 foundations under the company, Astra makes it a conscious effort to take an active part in and dedicating its ideas and work to the nation. for a prosperous and dignified Indonesia. Astra untuk Indonesia Sehat. The well-being of a nation lies on the well-being of its future generations. To ensure it can be achieved, the health of mothers and children are a priority of Astra untuk Indonesia Sehat. Astra is committed to protect and improve their health as they form healthy communities and societies. In turn, Astra believes they determine the quality of our overall well-being. Astra untuk Indonesia Cerdas. Greater access to and improved quality of education and vocational skills open the doors to better life quality. Astra is therefore committed to shaping smart, self-reliant generations. Astra works to tap into the knowledge and skills of Indonesia's human capital. As education in Indonesia is important for Astra, Astra ensures that Indonesian children can benefit from quality education as a tool for them to transform their lives for the better. Astra untuk Indonesia Hijau. A healthy and clean environment are essential for us to move forward in life. Through Astra untuk Indonesia Hijau, Astra acts upon its commitment to creating a healthy, safe, and sustainable environment. With global warming presenting real threats to our planet's survival, Astra is actively involved in various programs for a greener Earth as part of its contribution to improving the quality of our environment. Our planet and the future await us and the millions of other beings on Earth. Astra untuk Indonesia Kreatif. Through Astra untuk Indonesia Kreatif, Astra is on the ground working alongside communities to improve their prosperity by helping and facilitating small and medium businesses all over Indonesia. Astra provides training, coaching, funding, and equipment suited to the needs of the beneficiaries with one goal in mind: raising the nation's prosperity by creating excellent human capital and decent jobs. 133 Kampung Berseri Astra across 34 provinces focus on the development of villages based on 4 pillars, which include entrepreneurship, health, education, and environment. Kampung Berseri Astra continues to be developed based on the numbers and concepts towards Desa Sejahtera Astra. Satu Indonesia Awards. Satu Indonesia Awards is a form of appreciation towards the Indonesian youth who have the initiatives and idealism to share and create benefits for the communities. The awards have 5 main focuses, which include health, education, environment, entrepreneurship, and technology. Since March 2020 until today, Astra, through Nurani Astra, maintains its commitment to help the government, frontline health workers, and the community in facing the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia. To be an asset to the nation, Astra continues to embrace and work towards realizing Indonesia's dreams and to achieve sustainable growth, because your smile and the smile of the people are the smile of Astra, the smile of Indonesia. We are united, and together we shall achieve triumph as we walk towards an advanced and prosperous Indonesia. Astra, prosper with the nation.
Memberikan energi dapat diwujudkan dalam berbagai aspek dalam kehidupan kita. Melaju cepat, dinamis, dan relevan sesuai dengan perkembangan zaman. Memberikan energi untuk masa depan Indonesia yang berkelanjutan.
Ya, keberlanjutan itu sangat penting sekali ya buat Indika Energy ya. Dan itu mencakup bukan hanya di operasional kegiatan usaha yang saat ini saja, tetapi juga untuk pengembangan bisnis di masa mendatang gitu ya. Dan kita juga sudah berkomitmen untuk mencapai net carbon atau net zero emission sebelum 2050. Ya, sektor industri kendaraan berbasis listrik itu menjadi salah satu sektor penting di dalam strategi diversifikasinya Indika Energy. Ya, dan kita ingin berpartisipasi di dalam pengembangan ekosistem kendaraan listrik ini, baik itu dari hulu maupun sampai ke hilir. Ya, kami ingin pula berpartisipasi di dalam pengembangan pembangkit listrik tenaga surya. Ya, terutama untuk sektor komersial, industrial, dan tentu saja untuk sektor utilitas. Ya. Kami yakin bahwa tenaga surya ini akan menjadi suatu solusi yang berkelanjutan, aman, serta kompetitif.
Dengan eksistensi selama 5 dekade di bidang energi dan pertambangan, Indika Energy melakukan diversifikasi bisnis ke berbagai sektor dengan mengutamakan prinsip berkelanjutan.
Ya, Indika Energy ingin berpartisipasi di dalam pengembangan solusi berbasis alam, energi biomas, kehutanan energi, agroforestry, ya, ataupun konservasi ekosistem dan juga pengembangan masyarakat. Iya, ada beberapa provinsi di mana kami berinvestasi. Ya, salah satunya adalah di Sulawesi Selatan, di mana kami berinvestasi di pertambangan emas, yang merupakan salah satu pertambangan non batubara, di mana merupakan bagian daripada diversifikasi kami.
Indika Energy terus berkontribusi mewujudkan Indonesia maju, kuat, dan sejahtera. Memberikan energi untuk masa depan Indonesia yang berkelanjutan.
Inspired by the everlasting golden rays of the sun, which gives light and life, Eka Cipta Wijaya began his business, now known as Sinar Mas, in the city of Makassar in 1938. Fueled by the founder's passion and indomitable spirit, Sinar Mas has now flourished into 7 main pillars of business that provide products and services to cater to daily necessities. First, Asia Pulp and Paper. Paper has become an integral part of daily life, from stationery to food packaging. To cater to this demand, Asia Pulp and Paper, Sinar Mas or APP, Sinar Mas, produces paper pulp, paper, tissue and plastic packaging, with sales to over 150 countries, while applying principles of sustainable forest management. Second, agribusiness and food. To cater to the demand for high-quality food and nutrition, Sinar Mas Agribusiness and Food has successfully produced high-quality palm oil derivatives. Sinar Mas, through Golden Agri Resources, operates integrated palm oil estates, which focus on sustainable production of palm oil, while increasing production of high value-added goods, such as biodiesel, a renewable and sustainable fuel. Third, Sinar Mas Land. Everyone aspires to have a nice and comfortable home. Sinar Mas, through Sinar Mas Land, which operates in the developer and real estate sector, has developed a number of successful integrated towns and smart cities. Sinar Mas Land also develops hotel, industrial and business districts, as well as trade and shopping centers in Indonesia, other Asian countries and Europe. Fourth, financial services. Economic activities are part and parcel of our everyday lives. Sinar Mas, through Sinar Mas Financial Services, provides various services which include insurance, securities, multi-finance, banking, and other services to provide integrated solutions for the community. Fifth, communication and technology. Likewise, communication has become an indispensable part of everyday life. In the telecommunications sector, Smartfren has emerged as the leading provider for telecommunications services, including cellular data. Furthermore, the arrival of My Republic has enhanced its offering with the provision of triple play services. In line with rapid technological advancement and digital transformation, Sinar Mas is steadfast in pursuing innovation and has spread its wings in the digital sector. Sinar Mas believes that technology innovation will play a critical role in shaping the future. Sixth, energy and infrastructure. Energy is essential to life. For this reason, Sinar Mas Energy and Infrastructure is a business pillar engaged in electricity generation, coal mining and trading, infrastructure and multimedia. 7. Healthcare. Sinar Mas continues to strengthen its commitment in the healthcare sector. Sinar Mas believes that access to quality healthcare is the foundation of a nation's resilience. In addition, Sinar Mas is dedicated to strengthening education initiatives so that the quality of skilled human resources can be improved. Through various social initiatives, Sinar Mas also endeavours to support the welfare of the community to build a better Indonesia.